Well, good morning, everybody. We've got our trusty group here today, the Consulting Amigos, doing another expert topic for microgiants, and we're minus one of the amigos today, who's doing traveling, but we've got our basic old guys, Ray and not literally old in age, but long-term guys, Ray and Ed here, both experts in small business. So we're going to get into a subject following up on um, our last meeting, and we've been on a series of marketing and kind of how to go about do that step by step, and we'll just kind of get started here. So our meeting has gone through several steps here. Today we're going to talk about content and how to communicate your product or your service. And that follows several discussions we've had to get here in the first place. So just to do a little review for some of you who might not have caught all of these different videos, and the suggestion to go back and be sure and do that. We've gone through evaluating customers on the marketing cycle, planning cycle, and doing a customer analysis and showing a little bit about how we do that. Then we've talked about competition and competitive analysis in markets and niche markets. Then we have recently completed talking about company competencies, and then utilizing the customer analysis and market analysis. That brings us to the ability to do targeting. And then, of course, we've talked about developing a competitive value and ending up with a market positioning statement. And so this is where we've kind of gone through each of these steps till we are finally to the point of content. So that's where we're at here today. Now, the phases of the plan are to do the planning, do the positioning before you get to execution. I think this is kind of worth kind of emphasizing, because most people will kind of start over here in content or even in media selection. It's like, well, okay, what I want to do is do something, do advertising in this newspaper or to do an online ad. Okay, you haven't done any work. You don't know anything about what you're going to do, but you're going to get started doing some advertising, or you're going to tell your salesman to just go out and start calling people. Well, that doesn't work that well unless you've done the upfront planning and positioning. Once you've done the planning and positioning, then you can start thinking about the content. And then ultimately the media, the communication tools you're going to use. Then as you complete that and you've done some of this for a while, you do the analyzation, and then you start the process all over again, because you're going to adjust what you've just done. So that's sort of where we've been, and we're now going to talk a little bit more about content. Uh, so how do we get started on content? What do we do? Well, once your planning is completed, you've got your customer segments researched, you've done your customer profile in a written form. I mean, you need to concretize these things so that you know what you're about to do. Then you do your customer and prospect problems, where you've identified what are their challenges, what are their issues, what are the solutions that you're going to provide. And then we looked at you've also gone through and you've looked at your competitive market, your niche market specifically. In all cases, we're talking about your niche markets. Your small businesses can't capture a full large market. You've got to capture only a small one. That's the only way you can really make it work. You've done your direct competitor analysis. You've also looked at your competencies again and reviewed what is it that you do well. What products do you really kind of superior at? And you've shored up the gaps that you have in your skills, your skill gaps. And then you put together your marketing position and placement in a written form. so that you and everybody else can look at it and critique it. But mostly, this is your weather vane. This is the direction you're going. This is your compass. And this keeps everybody on the straight and narrow so that you are focused on accomplishing certain communications in certain places that point to your marketing position and your products. Now we're ready, okay, for the first time, but let's review a little bit about the customer loop. We talked last time about how we used to throw everybody in a funnel, and then we would qualify them. They would become aware, then you'd qualify them, and finally you'd sell. That's not the way it works anymore with all the different media. And we talked about these in detail. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, just as to review to say, here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to come up with copy to identify and satisfy the need and the desire that customers have come up with on their own, and you're going to match that through these different media. They're going to come to the decision phase based on looking at a variety of other things, mostly online. They're going to make the purchase. And then after the purchase, they're going to think about, well, was it easy to do? How is the delivery and other post-service issues and services? Then they're going to, if they're going to buy another one, they'll trigger the next one. And hopefully they will have developed a value perception about your product and company. And in that particular case, when they consider the next one, they're going to come right over. They're going to skip all the other stuff, and they're just going to come to you to purchase. And now this becomes the loop. They're going to continually go around the loop. They're evaluating, the purchase, the product, the quality, and the service. And hopefully you'll keep them on this loop. And so all of the content that we're writing is to create awareness first, etc. And so up in the beginning, we want to create awareness. And in this case, it's awareness of who you are, your customers, prospective clients, etc. Understand what they're about. They think they know what they need, but they don't know where to go, what to do necessarily. They may have touched on this before. They may have purchased something before, but you've got to let them know you're in that business. You can do that as well. Then we move on to the couple of the next phases, and that is that they'll come around and ultimately get to the final selection because they've evaluated it, they've looked at your content, maybe on social, maybe they've touched base and you've emailed, but probably they've looked at your website, and they make that final collection. So this is where the content needs to go and what we need to try and accomplish. So that means that all content isn't exactly the same. So here's how we go through this process. First, we're going to list the customer profile and solutions that are offered. Now, we've kind of already done that. You've got the customer profile. You've looked at how you're going to solve the problems that they have, or provide products that will solve a problem or a want or a need that they have. Then you're going to write the general copy that demonstrates your solutions. And this is just a first cut. It's like, our company, ABC Company, provides XYZ for people who are in this circumstance to kind of tie them in. You're part of this group. We know you're part of the group. And actually, if you're not part of this cohort group, you may not quite be the person, that we're trying to qualify for our particular business relationship. And finally, you format the message for the media. And then this leads to the next step, which is a media selection. So this is not that hard, and you can see that that once you have all of the basic information set, it should make it much easier to actually write. Now, a couple of caveats here. As you're going to adjust your copy for two things. One is, well, are you specifically trying to sell a individual product? You may have, going to have multiple products. You're going to try and sell individual products. This is where you develop your campaign that supports and drives this. But and then the second thing is, okay, well, where do our customers, this is your customer profile, where do our customers access us or anybody? And that simply is, what media do they use? Okay, let's walk through a couple of those things. If you have an industrial company or a B2B company, you're building products that you're selling to another business or commercial enterprise. Now you have to say, who is our buyer in this case? So the buyer is not going to be the same person necessarily for each kind of product. If you are selling industrial products and you happen to be, say, in the cleaning business, you're going to go to the people who make decisions about cleaning. Either that's going to be cleaning crew, or it's going to be the building maintenance person, whoever is taking care of the facilities. It's the facility management. Now that's quite different than the person who is selling accounting systems, maybe to the same company. And that is that you're now going to look for the comptroller or the president, maybe the treasurer, but probably not, maybe the general manager. Now those are the people. Okay, in each case, you're writing copy to those people. So you're going to write copy in a different way when you're talking to an executive about software. Then you're going to write your copy if you happen to be in the cleaning supply business, because you've got different types of people. They want different solutions. The solution that the executive is looking for is cost containment, efficiency, accuracy. And so you're going to be supporting those kinds of concepts. But the building manager is going to be looking for ease of use, cost comparisons, say level of cleanliness, those kinds of things. So obviously, it's this one company. You've got two different people selling two different things. The copy is going to be completely different because you're dealing with completely different buyers. And so each one of these products may actually be slightly different. If you're selling mops and brooms and buckets, that's going to be a little different approach than if you're selling cleaning solutions, paint remover, anything like that might be a solution that is used on a frequent basis versus a tool. And those are going to be the kinds of things. And you're going to respond in different ways based on the quality and the service, the support that you offer. And then, of course, the overall value, which includes the price, as well as the overall branding that you're supporting through the copy. So you're going to consider each of those things and write. Now, that's pretty straightforward, and you would expect everybody would do that all the time, right? But in fact, that doesn't happen necessarily. So if you're not using a marketing person that already has a sense for how this is going to happen and what you have to do to get the job focused on a target audience, you may well just have, if the president or the business owner of a smaller company is just saying, well, here's what we do, and you tell them what you do, that doesn't really get it. What you need to do is you need to tell them how we solve your problem or how we create more profit for you. Now, if you're on the consumer side of things, it's a whole different thing. And let's run through that real briefly. Customers who buy things for themselves or their family, consumers, are looking for different things. Of course, many of them want quality. Most of them want value. It's their perceived value. We've talked a little bit about the perceived value in the past. And a lot of times they're really buying based on their perception of say, how something looks, how it's designed, etc. If you're selling clothing or handbags or travel bags, suitcases, that type of thing, or cars or houses, many times you're appealing to an emotional level and you're creating more of a want than a need. Yes, you need to have um, some vinegar in your kitchen, and you need to have some cleaning solutions. But you want to have better pots and pans. You probably have some that work. Maybe you really want something that's more what a chef might use. Maybe you'll find that your customers are very interested in sort of the bright, shiny, all cast iron or whatever it is, or even a cutting board, as simple as cutting board. And you know, there are several people now saying don't use wood because it has germs, and don't use plastic because you end up with microplastics. And so they're trying to sell something new and different, tell you what you've done in the past isn't really quite right, and you need to consider something new and different. So that's a completely different kind of a customer. And you're going to think about, well, who is the buyer? In this case, it's almost, in the vast majority of cases, it's the woman of a household that's going to be making those decisions. Occasionally, men will, but for the most part, that's going to be an unusual situation. And trying to get into those kinds of markets are obviously difficult. Why? Because the old companies that have been around for a long time, the Campbells of the world, et cetera, they kind of own the soup business, and they buy the same thing over and over and over. And so you've got to do something quite different when you're breaking into somebody else's market. And your copy is going to be different. You have to show why you're better. You have to demonstrate that your solution is better, that it's going to taste better, that it's more wholesome, that it is more healthy. So those are the kinds of things that you do for the consumer. And then, of course, you're going to have a different, entirely select media for those because consumers look at different media, and they're going to be using some of the broad kinds of things. Do they read magazines? Yes. Do they read newspapers? Mostly no. Um, and That's a little older group than say your target customer is probably going to be on the younger side, the younger family that has been in a home recently and maybe with younger kids where decisions haven't been completely made. All their purchases for dishes and for pots and pans haven't been made necessarily. So that may be your market, and you should be having a niche that's really tight like that. So, those are the things you're going to look for, and where do they go? And they're going online to Facebook and other social media, and they're communicating that way, and they're listening to people who are um, advocates for a certain product, or create they have an audience and they give suggestions on what to buy, that kind of thing. And so those advocates are starting to be another way to do that. Those are some very cheap and inexpensive things to do, which we'll talk about when we get into the media selection, because now is the time when you begin to merge your copy with the media. Okay, one more kind of concept, and that is that you want to develop content pillars. These are things like you got to show your customer consumer expertise. Show how you deeply understand that niche. Your customer, you need to show that you know your customer's problems and solutions, your prospects, and that's a very strong pillar. Then you want to differentiate yourself from customers, show customers how you stand out. For instance, authentic branding, specialized service, convenience, advantage, local expertise. Using all of these kinds of things, you can end up beginning to write something that's pretty good. Now, if you're a good writer, great. And even then, if you're a good writer, you should always run it by somebody who's had experience just writing solid sentences that are appropriate. You never want misspellings. You never want poor grammar. So you should always have someone check that for you. And so there we have it. The basically a content creation. And this is a good time. And if you enjoyed this, we hope you like and subscribe so that we can continue to offer these to other people like yourselves. Okay, gentlemen, let's see here. We'll unsave this. So that was sort of a basic idea on writing content and where you go. Now I know I'm preaching to the choir here because Ray Anderson has got a communications degree and done a lot of writing, and has been a superb salesman over the years. So give me a critique, Ray. Where did I go wrong?
I think it was good content. I think as I listened to you discuss this and know how much you've done over the years, I think it was a good summary of how somebody can develop content. But I think it also, I'm not sure if we were real clear on this, that it's important to get a professional involved to help you draft it so that, you don't get off base. Somebody like us, and I'm wondering whether that's an appropriate thing if we're, self-aggrandizing or if it's an appropriate thing for us to tell our potential listeners.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mentioned that you ought to have somebody check your copy, but really it could go a lot deeper than that in all of these things. If this begins to sound a little strange to you or foreign, and you're not really where to go, you sure where to go? You can buy out these services for people who do this all the time. Uh,
Right.
Certainly in the advertising side of things, as long as you have a very clearly defined positioning statement, that way you keep them in line and they don't go off half-cocked, and you explain to them exactly what product you're trying to sell and why you're trying to sell it. You need to have a little bit of that background, or you'll end
Well,
up,
see, that's the kind of stuff that we need to share with them. Just what you
yeah,
just shared.
yeah.
And whether
And
we've
that's
done that in the past or not, I'm not really clear.
Yeah, well, and that's why it's so important to go back, and if you haven't listened to it, go back and look at the videos we've done on marketing positioning, because you've got to understand who you are and who your customers are and why you're different, or how are you going to explain it.
Right.
Now I will say that the really good marketing people many of them have an innate understanding of, okay, well, and they want to determine, okay, why do you stand out? Why are you different? And they're going to try and find that. Now, if you don't give them some kind of background, and they'll ask questions, but if you don't give them some background, they're going to be shooting in the dark. And
Right. Right.
so many times they'll make an assumption that is completely wrong. And you've got to be able to bring them back and say, no, I'm not selling blue widgets. I'm selling brown widgets.
Hmm.
And we do that because, X, Y, and Z. So that they can go, oh, okay. So now I understand that. And so those are the kinds of things. And so if you were to give them a little kind of an idea verbally as well, or a conversation, have them write some content and then bring it forward to you. But where they're really good too is coming up with some of the fun, creative ideas. Many small business owners some are good at it. many of them are not so good
Right.
at coming up with creative ideas, different ways to say the same thing. That's where an agency can really be helpful. They can come up with great ideas that you wouldn't even have thought about. It could be something crazy, something really innovative. Um, that's what they do for a living. That's what you
Right.
pay an agency for, is to try and help somebody understand how to say something different about you that accomplishes everything at once, like creating awareness.
Hmm.
How you've got to get attention. And if you're just standing, droll, well, we do this and we're great, that's not going to work as nearly as well as somebody who's a little bit more animated and waving their arms or whatever the case may be, or using an object that is completely foreign and shocking just to get your attention. If a really well done ad, and it doesn't matter, it can be in print or it can be a still photo or it can be a video. Well done ad many times can really leave an impression, and that those are worth paying for, as long as you finally get to who you are and how you can contact us.
Right.
Um, One of the advertisers' agency tricks is to, and they believe this, it's not really a trick, but just they believe that, well, lots of different kinds of advertising tend to work better than just say one. So you need a continual ongoing flow of advertising. That's old fashioned. I mean, that's what we used to call mass advertising.
Hmm.
You remember that term from you're practically from our school days.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we haven't talked about mass advertising, marketing people, communications haven't talked about mass advertising since the 80s. It was over then in the
Right. Since Ed was working in the publication
That's
industry.
true. That's true. Now, it waned over a period of time, but it's just that, and even Ed's guys would never say, "Oh yeah, we want to tell the whole world all the time." You'd put certain kinds of ads in certain sections of the
The
newspaper,
newspaper, yeah.
or you would use zones where you'd limit the geography. So that was done. That's been done, and newspapers did that, well. TV advertising didn't do that very well until the 80s, when they began going into cable and able to put ads on in different geographic areas. So, but from that point on, we've really talked much more about, you know, niche marketing or at least smaller markets, even if it wasn't what we would call a niche today, it would still be a smaller geography based on the approach. But many of those really good advertising agencies can come up with stuff that is really very memorable and very fun to watch. And we see a lot of those. You want to see the best of those ideas, take a look at Super Bowl ads.
Yeah.
You want to see the worst of those ideas, take a look at what Budweiser did. And I think we all know how they screwed up, thinking that they had another niche market that they were missing. And they tried to use a person from that niche market to represent Budweiser in a way that was completely foreign to that market. But in the same breath, they took the 95% of their market, which were young men, and they basically said, "You're an idiot if you drink this beer.
I'm
You're
sure. I'm sorry that which ad was that? That you've kind of lost me.
Well, that was the ad where they hired a cross-dresser who didn't even know anything about beer
Hmm.
to promote it, who was, a young man dressed as a woman, and really trying to break into a
The
cross
transgender market?
a cross-dressing in a transgender market.
Wow.
And it completely backfired. And I happened to go to Europe right after, not much after that. And even in the little markets in England, and I happened to be going through a lot of them. We were in many of these little markets because we were buying food, you know.
Yeah.
The Budweiser would be what's left. The Coors and all the local brands were sold out.
Mm.
Literally, there was a stack of Budweiser where not a single can had been taken off the shelf.
Wow.
So it was a very, very dramatic. They basically tried to move into a market that was completely and totally opposed to their existing market.
Well, yeah, that was obviously a foolish decision.
It was a bad decision. And all the people, it took a little while. You know, first they fired the person who put the ad on, and then they fired the supervisor. And, so as I understand it, all the people who touched that basically are gone
Mm.
because when it finally filtered up to the vice presidents and presidents, they realized really how ridiculously stupid this was. The president, the vice presidents, et cetera, should have been fired as well because
Right.
they weren't watching their brand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And
that seems like
that's what they are supposed to do is watch the brand. They're supposed to position their beer in the right place at the right time, and they didn't do a very good job. They did a horrendous job. That is breaking the rule of positioning.
yeah.
Ed, any comments about all of that? I know you've had
Yeah,
questions in the past.
that was an excellent presentation, Ron.
Thank you.
I like the way you pull everything together from the beginning to the end. And if you're going to be writing content, you got to make sure you're writing the right content,
Hmm.
and that's going to resonate with your potential customers. But I find it really hard nowadays to get any type of engagement on content. So when you could come up with something very brilliant and very provocative and put it on LinkedIn and might get one or two responses. That's it. And I would envision that you would want more than that. You would want more
Well,
people to weigh in, and for
yeah.
whatever reason, it's very, very difficult to get people to weigh in.
Well, it is, and it's a very, very small percentage, and it doesn't matter what you're trying to sell, and it's not you. It's to give you an idea. The dairy that I'm still working with and training a new agency to take over some of the duties that I've been doing for decades and decades. Um, Basically, we take a look at this very, very carefully. And when we do an ad, that is a good one, that is selling the product that we sell and creative and following our branding scheme that has been developed over decades. We'll put an ad out and get 3% who might click on that ad.
Mm.
Now, we will show it 1,000 times, 2,000 times, and we'll get two, three, four clicks. And then they'll go to the website and do their investigation. We're in this, we've hit the awareness thing. Now, do they really want to have milk delivered or not? And then they want to know a little bit more about it. And so they'll come and they'll investigate that. And then they'll fill out the form. And so we'll end up with maybe 1%. We have a very high, what we would call a close rate from they clicked on it, they looked at us. We'll get maybe one in three, or 3 out of 10, 2 out of 10. Maybe as low as a 10% close rate all the way to the end, which is like a 1% close rate of everything that we're doing. And we're very happy with that because the cost per sale is a small fraction of the traditional way of going to the door and selling. So we've lowered the cost of the sale by 75%. We're happy with that. We're very, very happy with that. It's taken us 2 years of testing and writing content, putting different images, doing different marketing media in order to be able to hone that down to a place where we can say, okay, now we really know how to do this. We've finally figured this out. So we've been online since 1998, and we have known that social media did not work until about 5 or 6 years ago, until videos started. And then it exploded among that younger population. And now we're finding that it's finally working. And we've honed it down to where it's working very well. So then the question is, okay, well, why can't I get any response? Well, it just takes a long time and a lot of time and effort and some money to finally get it honed down to that level. Now, this is a very competitive market. What you do is not competitive because you're unlike almost anybody who's out there. So explaining your differentiations, but in each of our cases, one client represents a huge amount of revenue comparatively. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of our revenue. Because the kinds of things that we do, you can only do that for 5, 10, 15 clients at a time. I don't think I ever had more than 12 or 15 clients at one time, when I was, at the peak of my busy times. So that's kind of the way that goes. Now, having said that, keep in mind that you're using one media. And in the case of a relationship sale, which we talked about way back when we're talking about the difference between selling an item and selling a relationship, that a relationship sale doesn't necessarily work online. A relationship takes relationships. And so the target market in this particular case is not potentially not even your client. It's other consultants, it's accountants, it's lawyers. That's the target market for consulting. And so, in a case like, and I don't mean to be talking about you specifically, but I mean in a case where you're selling an intangible service product where the evaluation is very difficult, what they want to buy is more efficiency. They want to fix a problem or they want to create efficiency. Those are the two things that people buy in say, businesses buy in consulting. And so you've got to demonstrate that while building. And then once you demonstrate that, you have to prove that your consulting people are in fact experts in it. And once you can do that, then you've got an opportunity to have conversations. That usually requires third-party recommendations. And that's usually where that comes from.
Wow.
So it's like, okay, fine. You need to develop a reputation among a certain number of people. And actually, once you start that relationship with individuals who are surrounding a particular type of client, then probably a email newsletter is the right approach. That's one of the best ways to do it because people who are buying high-end consulting services are not online. I mean,
Yeah.
I am online a lot, and I would say I look at my LinkedIn once a month. I don't spend a lot of time browsing around on that. If I want to know something, I I go to AI.
Yeah.
How do you advertise in AI? I mean, I haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah. And AI is so good for so many things. I did a speech recently on why Easter's change so frequently. And I really didn't have a clear idea. So I asked AI to give me a 5-minute speech, and it was wonderful.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So what did you do? Just go read the speech?
Well, I didn't read it, but I was able to use it as content because
Right.
I didn't really completely understand, and then I learned there are moon phases, and it's after every mil I can't even think of the word, but there's a certain moon that has to occur before Easter occurs, and that's why it continues to
Okay.
shift from year to year.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, no, it's incredible what AI can do, and it's really unknown how that's going to work in advertising.
Oh yeah. Oh,
The
it's unknown how it's going to work in our lives in general. I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's it's a double-edged sword. There's certainly obviously many positive things about it, but there's some dark sides of this that
yeah,
we are going to probably experience in the next decade.
sure, there will be. So in terms of people utilizing AI, they're going to that I think we're going to see companies and consumers doing less browsing on the internet as a whole in, say, social media and websites than they have in the past. So
Right.
AI is actually going to take that away because search is going to drop.
Yeah.
So we have begun to think about how do we get referenced in search. So excuse me, in search, an AI search. So when you go on to Google and you type in a search, it's many times it pops up and it puts a little AI in there and it says, "Would you like to do AI?" Well, it's giving you if you're asking a question, it's giving you an answer now, not giving you a list of websites.
Hmm.
Websites follow its answer if you've noticed.
Hmm.
But many times they have referrals on there, so they've got that little teeny button on the end of the paragraph where they got that particular copy.
Hmm. So you can
So
reference it.
So that's where it's coming from. So if you have a product, and I've done this just a little bit, I've started to do some experimentation with the value diamond because that's unique. Nobody does that quite like that. So I've been able to find that I have been able to get AI to reference that when I specifically ask for the Burgess Value Diamond, it will reference my material on that and include the link in the response. So if you're selling home delivery milk, you want to make sure that you're the authority on the questions that are being asked.
Right.
Where does the milk come from? Tell me about the ecology of glass bottles. how many how many times is a bottle washed before you throw it away? What's the comparison between plastic and glass? All of those questions, now we have to answer them in hopes that we will be listed as a resource for the answer that AI is using. So it's a totally different kind of thing now. And that requires, back to our subject, content.
Yeah.
And so instead of putting on your website what you do and what your products are, now you have to put on your website the answer to every question that you've ever had. Okay. So there's what you spend your time on, Ed, is, those kinds of common questions and what those answers are. And I would suggest Aesop would be a great place to be writing content because and that needs to be on a website, not I don't know that it picks anything up from like LinkedIn. I don't know that. I've never noticed a LinkedIn article, but there's lots of Wikipedia ones out there, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so bad that I actually ask not to use Wikipedia because I can't believe Wikipedia because that can be changed on a daily basis.
Right.
Say, especially things that are political or opinion issues. You don't
Right.
want you don't want to use that because it literally changes on a daily basis because people go in and change it. Somebody else change it. It's like an ongoing argument on Wikipedia,
Yeah, exactly.
for the hot topics.
Right.
So,
Well, thank you, gentlemen.
yes, thank you, gentlemen, for being here to kind of, you know, comment on and Ray, you're an expert in communications, and so I appreciate your comments as well. And Ed, you're an excellent observer of all things business. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll see you again soon.
Yeah, see you next week.